The British soldier Henry Tandey was the most decorated private in the English army. At the end of a battle in September of 1918, near the village of Marcoing in France, a wounded German crossed his line of fire. Tandey aimed, but could not bring himself to shoot a defenseless man and let him go. Years later, it was said that soldier was a young corporal named Adolf Hitler. In 1943, the British took the corpse of Glyndwr Michael, a poor Welshman who died after ingesting rat poison. They dressed the body in a Royal Navy officer's uniform, strapped a briefcase to the wrist containing fake invasion plans for Greece, and dumped everything into the sea near Spain. The Germans found the body and swallowed the story, moving troops to the wrong place. The real landing was in Sicily. On September 26, 1983, Soviet Lieutenant Colonel Stanislav Petrov was on duty when the alarm went off. 5 American nuclear missiles were incoming. Protocol demanded he notify command immediately for a counterstrike. Petrov froze. He found it strange that an attack would involve only 5 missiles and reported it as a false alarm. He was right. It was sunlight reflecting off clouds that had fooled the satellites. One man alone prevented nuclear apocalypse. On August 6, 1945, the engineer Tsutomu Yamaguchi was on a work trip in Hiroshima when the first atomic bomb fell. Burned and with ruptured eardrums, he managed to make it home. The problem was that his home was in Nagasaki. 3 days later, while telling his boss what he had seen, the second bomb exploded over the city. He survived again. Hiru Onoda was a Japanese officer stationed on the island of Lubang in the Philippines with a clear order: resist and never surrender. When Japan capitulated in 1945, Onoda did not believe it and assumed it was enemy propaganda. He continued in the jungle, setting ambushes for nearly 30 years. He only put down his weapon in 1974, after the government located his former commanding officer and brought him in person to revoke the order. He handed over the rifle, still in working condition. He died in 2014 at 91 years old. Sergei Aleshkov was orphaned at 5 years old when the Nazis killed his mother and brother in a Russian village in 1942. He fled into the forest and was found by Soviet soldiers who adopted him as the son of the regiment. At 6 years old, he became a messenger. He carried messages and once warned commanders of a bombing in time to save officers. He received the Medal for Military Merit. He is remembered as the youngest combatant of World War II. On Christmas Eve of 1971, Lanza Flight 508 was struck by lightning and broke apart in the air over the Peruvian Amazon. Julianne Kupke, 17 years old, plummeted approximately 10,000 feet, still strapped to her seat. She woke up alone on the jungle floor with a broken collarbone and a swollen eye. She followed the course of a river, as her biologist father had taught her, with maggots burrowing into her wounds. 11 days later, loggers found her alive. She was the sole survivor of the 92 people on board. On October 13, 1972, a Uruguayan Air Force plane crashed in the Andes carrying a rugby team and family members, 45 people in total. The impact and the cold killed many immediately. Those who remained were trapped at nearly 13,000 feet of altitude, without food, surrounded by snow. An avalanche buried others a few days later. Official searches were called off, and the world had already given them up for dead while they were still fighting to breathe each frozen morning. To avoid starving to death, the survivors made the hardest decision of their lives. They ate the flesh of their dead companions, preserved by the snow. It was that or die. After more than 2 months, Nando Parado and Roberto Canessa crossed frozen mountains on foot for 10 days until they found a Chilean peasant. On December 23, 1972, 72 days after the crash, 16 people were rescued alive. Many remain friends to this day, carrying no guilt for what they had to do. On July 20th, 1944, Colonel Klaus von Stauffenberg left a briefcase packed with explosives under the table, where Hitler was studying maps at headquarters. The bomb was just a few steps from the dictator. Then an officer accidentally bumped the briefcase and pushed it behind the heavy oak leg of the table. The wood absorbed the impact. The bomb exploded and killed 4 people. But Hitler walked away with little more than ringing ears. Stauffenberg was shot by firing squad hours later. Marvin Heemeyer, a welder from Granby, Colorado, had been fighting with the city government for years over a piece of land. In secret, he armored a bulldozer with steel plates and concrete, creating a machine that no bullet could stop. On June 4, 2004, he drove the improvised tank through town and demolished 13 buildings, including City Hall. The police were powerless against it. In the end, with the bulldozer stuck in the rubble, Heemeyer killed himself inside. Nobody else died. Desmond Doss was a Seventh-day Adventist who refused to touch a weapon out of religious conviction. Even so, he enlisted as a combat medic. In May of 1945, at the Battle of Okinawa, his unit had to retreat from a cliff swept by Japanese machine guns. Doss stayed. Alone, he lowered approximately 75 wounded men down the escarpment, one by one, praying with each rescue just to be able to save one more. He received the Medal of Honor, the first conscientious objector in history to earn it. The British officer Adrian Carton de Weert fought in 3 wars and collected wounds like trophies. He was shot in the face, the head, the stomach, the ankle, the hip, and the leg. He lost an eye and a hand. When a doctor refused to amputate his destroyed fingers, he pulled them off himself with his teeth. He also survived a plane crash into the sea. He died of natural causes at 83 years old. On September 30th, 1999, in the Tokaimura nuclear accident in Japan, the technician Hisashi Uchi received the highest dose of radiation ever recorded in a human being. His chromosomes were completely destroyed. The body could no longer produce new skin or blood. The doctors, pressured to try everything, kept him alive for 83 days with constant transfusions, while the skin disintegrated. He begged them to stop. He died in December of that year, in tremendous suffering. During the Winter War in 1939, the Finnish soldier Simo Häyhä hunted Soviet soldiers in the snow using iron sights, without a scope, to avoid giving away his position with the glare of the glass. Dressed in white, in temperatures of 40 below 0 Fahrenheit, he killed more than 500 enemies in a matter of months. The Russians nicknamed him the White Death and tried everything to kill him. A bullet tore away part of his jaw in 1940. Even so, Häyhä survived and lived to 96 years old. In 1942, Polish soldiers in Iran bought a bear cub from a boy and named him Wojtek. He grew up in the middle of the troop, play wrestled, and drank beer with the men. To board a military ship, he was officially enlisted in the army with a serial number and the rank of corporal. At the Battle of Monte Cassino in 1944, Wojtek carried heavy ammunition crates to the firing line without dropping a single one. He died at the Edinburgh Zoo in 1963. On July 13, 1978, the Soviet physicist Anatoly Bogorsky was checking a particle accelerator in Protvino when he stuck his head into the path of the beam without seeing that the equipment was on. A proton beam, traveling at nearly the speed of light, passed through his skull. He saw a flash brighter than 1,000 suns and felt no pain at the time. The left side of his face became paralyzed and he lost hearing in one ear. Even so, he survived, finished his doctorate, and kept working. Chips was an ordinary family dog, donated to the American military in World War II. In July of 1943, during the landing in Sicily, his patrol was pinned down by an enemy machine gun hidden inside a hut. Chips broke free of his leash, ran through this gunfire, and attacked the shooters inside the bunker, forcing the entire garrison to surrender. He came out with burns. He was decorated and returned to the family that had lent him. In 1975, the Khmer Rouge of Pol Pot took over Cambodia and declared Year Zero. Civilization would restart from nothing. They emptied the cities by force, abolished money, schools, and religion, and sent the population to the fields. Anyone wearing glasses could be executed just for looking like an intellectual. At the secret prison S-21, thousands were tortured and killed. In less than 4 years, close to 2 million people died, nearly a quarter of the country. Pol Pot died a free man in 1998. Josef Mengele was the SS officer who decided, on the platform at Auschwitz, who would work and who would go straight to the gas chamber. He was obsessed with twins. He performed cruel experiments on children. He sewed siblings together, injected substances into their eyes to try to change the color. A man with an elegant appearance and a calm voice doing things nobody could believe were real. When the war ended, Mengele simply fled. He passed through Argentina, then Paraguay, and went into hiding in Brazil under a false name, protected by a network of Nazi supporters. He was never arrested. On February 7, 1979, he suffered a stroke while swimming at the beach in Bertioga in Sao Paulo and drowned. He was buried as Wolfgang Gerhard. Only in 1985 was the body exhumed, and later DNA tests confirmed the monster of Auschwitz lived peacefully in Brazil. Lyudmila Pavlichenko was a history student in Kiev when she enlisted in the Red Army in 1941. She became the deadliest female sniper of World War II, with 309 confirmed kills, many of them officers and other enemy snipers. Wounded in combat, she was sent to the United States as a propaganda symbol, where she became friends with Eleanor Roosevelt. She carried the trauma of war for the rest of her life. She died in 1974, at 58 years old, far from the battlefields. In the early morning of April 26, 1986, operators at the Chernobyl power plant in Soviet Ukraine were running a safety test on Reactor 4. A flawed design combined with wrong decisions left the reactor unstable. When they pressed the emergency shutdown button, instead of stopping everything, it triggered the explosion. The reactor blew off its own roof and hurled radioactive material into the air. Firefighters went to put out the blaze without knowing they were receiving lethal doses. In September of 1987, scrap metal collectors in the state of Goiânia, Brazil, found a metal capsule abandoned in a former radiotherapy building. Inside it, a blue powder that glowed in the dark, cesium-137. They thought it was beautiful. They took it home, rubbed it on their skin, gave it away as gifts, and spread it through the neighborhood with no idea what it was. It was the worst radiological accident in the world. 4 people died, including a 6-year-old girl. Irma Grese joined the SS very young and became one of the most feared guards at Auschwitz and Bergen-Belsen. Female prisoners who survived described her whipping women for pure pleasure, setting trained dogs on them, and choosing who went to the gas chamber on a whim. When the Allies liberated the camps, she was tried and sentenced to death at 22 years old. Bernie Madoff was one of the most respected men on Wall Street, a former chairman of NASDAQ, with a line of people begging to invest with him. For decades, he promised high and steady returns that seemed never to fail. The detail was that there was no investment at all. He paid old clients with money from new ones, a giant pyramid scheme. When it all collapsed in 2008, the whole exceeded $65 billion. He was sentenced to 150 years and died in prison in 2021. The Colombian Luis Garavito preyed on poor and homeless boys throughout the 1990s, luring them with promises of food or money, sometimes dressed as a priest. He confessed to approximately 140 murders, but police estimate nearly 200 victims in total. He was caught thanks to the clues he left near the bodies. He received a sentence of more than 1,800 years. Graham Young in the United Kingdom was only 14 years old when he started testing poisons on his own family. He mixed thallium, arsenic, and antimony into the food and coldly observed the effects, like a laboratory experiment. Committed to a psychiatric hospital, he was released years later, considered cured. He went back to poisoning, now co-workers, and killed 2 more. Doctors took a long time to suspect because thallium is nearly invisible. He died in his cell in 1990. The Thai woman Chamoy Thipiasso set up, in the 1980s, a pyramid scheme disguised as an oil investment. She defrauded more than 16,000 people and received an absurd sentence of 141,078 years in prison, a world record. In 1992, Pepsi launched in the Philippines a contest called Number Fever. Whoever had the bottle cap with the winning number would win a fortune. Due to a printing error, 800,000 caps came out with the winning number instead of just 2. Suddenly, hundreds of thousands of poor people believed they had become rich. Pepsi could not pay. The outrage turned to riots. Trucks were set on fire, grenades thrown at warehouses, and at least 5 people died. On July 9, 1962, the United States detonated a nuclear bomb at approximately 250 miles of altitude over the Pacific in a test called Starfish Prime. The night sky turned colorful for several minutes, like an artificial aurora. But the electromagnetic pulse from the explosion blew out streetlights in Hawaii, more than 600 miles away, and damaged satellites in orbit. In January of 2016, the American student Otto Warmbier, 21 years old, was arrested at the end of a tourist trip to North Korea, accused of trying to take a propaganda poster from the hotel. The regime sentenced him to 15 years of hard labor in a trial that lasted a few minutes. More than a year later, he was released and sent back to the United States, but arrived in a coma with severe damage throughout his body. He died days later in June of 2017, without ever being able to tell what he went through. In October of 1962, an American U-2 spy plane flew over Cuba and returned with photos that chilled the White House. The Soviet Union was building nuclear missile bases on the island just minutes from American territory. For 13 days, the world stood on the brink of atomic war, with armed submarines and orders ready to fire. Kennedy was negotiating secretly with Moscow. At the last moment, both sides backed down. On June 28, 1914, Archduke Franz Ferdinand was visiting Sarajevo when a first assassination attempt with a bomb failed. The convoy changed its route, but nobody told the driver, who turned down the wrong street and stopped to reverse. By sheer bad luck, he stopped right in front of Gavrilo Princip, one of the conspirators, who had already given up and was eating a snack. Princip drew his weapon and killed the Archduke and his wife. In 1911, the Italian Vincenzo Peruggia, who worked at the Louvre, hid the Mona Lisa under his coat and walked out the door like anyone else. The museum did not notice the disappearance until the following day. Peruggia kept the painting in a trunk at home for 2 years, saying he only wanted to return it to Italy. He was caught in 1913 while trying to sell it in Florence. The theft made headlines around the entire world. Before that, the Mona Lisa was just another painting. Afterward, it became the most famous on the planet. Franz Reichelt was a Parisian tailor obsessed with the idea of creating a parachute suit that would save aviators in a fall. He tested the invention on mannequins, with poor results, but was convinced it would work with a real person. On February 4th, 1912, he climbed to the first platform of the Eiffel Tower before a crowd and cameras. He hesitated for long minutes on the edge. Then he jumped. The suit did not open. He fell about 187 feet and died on impact, all of it captured on film. On December 22, 2001, just months after September 11th, Richard Reed boarded a flight from Paris to Miami with explosives hidden inside his own shoes. Mid-flight, he tried to light the fuse with matches, but the material was damp from sweat and would not catch fire. A flight attendant smelled something burning and the passengers subdued him. Nobody was hurt. Reed got life in prison. It is because of this bungling man that we still take off our shoes at the airport to this day. In December of 1914, on the western front of World War I, German and British soldiers were living soaked in trench mud, separated by a few yards of earth. On Christmas Eve, the Germans began singing and lighting candles at the edge of the trenches. Little by little, men from both sides climbed out of their hiding places, shook hands, and traded cigarettes and family photos. The next day, they went back to killing each other. On March 27, 1977, at the airport in Tenerife in the Canary Islands, a thick fog covered the runway. 2 Boeing 747s, one from KLM and one from Pan Am, were sitting there because of a route diversion. There was a serious miscommunication with the control tower. The KLM plane began its takeoff roll, believing it had clearance, with the other 747 still on the runway ahead. The collision killed 583 people. It is the deadliest aviation disaster of all time. Pablo Escobar ran the Medellin cartel and was once listed by Forbes magazine as the 7th richest man on the planet. He had so much power he negotiated with the Colombian government to build his own prison, La Catedral, from which he came and went as he pleased. When he escaped from there, a task force hunted his trail for months, tracking his phone calls. On December 2, 1993, during a phone call with his son, he was located and killed on a rooftop. Hitler survived dozens of assassination attempts throughout his life. The most impressive was by Georg Elser in November of 1939. The factory worker single-handedly built a bomb inside a column of a hall in Munich, with the timer calculated down to the details. But Hitler cut his speech short that night and left 13 minutes before the explosion, which killed other people. The dictator seemed to have supernatural luck. The Nazis believed Icelanders were the purest and most ancient people of the Nordic race, the guardians of the old Viking sagas they so idolized. Himmler's SS had a genuine interest in the island and its mythology. But history tripped up the plan. In May of 1940, it was the British who occupied Iceland first without firing a shot, precisely to prevent the Germans from getting there first. In February of 1945, Allied bombings devastated the German city of Dresden and killed around 25,000 people. Nazi propaganda minister Joseph Goebbels saw an opportunity. He took the official death report and simply added a 0 at the end, turning 25,000 into 250,000. The lie stuck so well that many people repeated the false number for generations. In 1932, thousands of emus, those enormous flightless birds, invaded farmland in Western Australia. The farmers called for help, and the government sent soldiers armed with machine guns. It seemed like it was going to be easy. It was not. The emus scattered into small groups, zigzagged too fast, and even withstood shots that should have killed them. After spending thousands of rounds and taking down very few animals, the army gave up. In 1958, Mao Zedong decided that sparrows were pests because they ate grain from the fields and ordered all of China to exterminate them. Crowds banged pots and chased the birds until they dropped dead from exhaustion. They killed hundreds of millions. The problem was that sparrows also ate insects. Without them, locusts and other pests multiplied out of control and devoured the crops. The decision helped trigger a famine that killed tens of millions. Hedy Lamarr was one of the most glamorous actresses in Hollywood in the 1940s, but what kept her awake at night was not movies. It was inventing. During World War II, together with the musician George Antheil, she patented a frequency hopping system to guide torpedoes without the signal being jammed by the enemy. The industry treated her as just a pretty face. Decades later, that idea became the foundation of technologies like Wi-Fi and Bluetooth. Alan Turing led the team at Bletchley Park that broke the Nazis' Enigma code, a feat that shortened World War II and saved millions of lives. On top of that, he practically laid the foundations of modern computing. But in 1952, he was prosecuted for being homosexual, which was a crime in the United Kingdom, and forced to undergo chemical castration with hormones. Humiliated and weakened, he died in 1954 from cyanide poisoning. He only received an official pardon from the Queen in 2013. Between 1998 and 2003, the Democratic Republic of the Congo became the stage for the deadliest conflict since World War II. Several countries and dozens of militias fought over control of minerals like coltan, used in cell phones and electronics. Most deaths did not come from gunfire, but from the hunger and diseases caused by the chaos. It is estimated that more than 5 million people died. Hitler killed himself inside his bunker in Berlin. For decades, the Soviets kept in a secret archive a skull fragment with a bullet hole, presented to the world as the physical proof of the dictator's death. In 2009, American researchers were allowed to examine the bone and run DNA tests. The result was a major embarrassment for Moscow. The skull belonged to a woman under 40 years old. It was not Hitler's. William Patrick Hitler was the son of one of Adolf's half-brothers and lived in Europe. He even tried to use the famous surname for personal advantage, but ended up having a bitter falling out with his uncle. He emigrated to the United States, and during the war enlisted in the American Navy and fought against Nazi Germany itself. To get in, he had to prove that, despite the name, he was on the right side. Afterward, he disappeared into ordinary life. During World War II, the Coca-Cola factory in Germany lost access to the original syrup, which came from the United States, now an enemy country. The head of the German operation, Max Keith, did not want to close the doors and lay everyone off. In 1940, he gathered the ingredients still available in the wartime economy, like whey and fruit scraps, and created a new drink to sell instead. He named it Fanta. Jack Churchill, nicknamed Mad Jack, was a British officer who believed going into combat without a sword in hand was something for people with no style whatsoever. In World War II, he brought to the battlefield a longbow, a Scottish broadsword, and even a set of bagpipes. There's a confirmed record of him killing a German soldier with an arrow, the only confirmed death by bow in the entire war. Eduard Bloch was a Jewish doctor in the Austrian city of Linz who cared for Hitler's mother, Clara, during the cancer that took her in 1907. The young Adolf was deeply moved by the doctor's kindness in his mother's final days and never forgot it. Years later, already in power and persecuting Jews across all of Europe, Hitler called Bloch a noble Jew and personally ordered that he be protected and allowed to emigrate safely to the United States. William James Sidis entered Harvard at just 11 years old and was already lecturing on advanced mathematics to adult professors. Still a child, he spoke several languages fluently. Legendary estimates place his IQ above 250, a number nobody ever actually managed to measure, but his father pushed him into the spotlight too early, and the press hounded him for his entire life. Sidis ended up withdrawing from everything, took ordinary jobs, and died poor and isolated in 1944. Marie Curie was the first person in history to win 2 Nobel Prizes, one in physics and one in chemistry, for her pioneering work with radioactivity. She used to carry tubes of radioactive elements in her lab coat pocket and kept samples in her drawer, fascinated by the greenish glow they emitted in the dark. Nobody yet knew the danger. The constant exposure destroyed her bone marrow, and she died in 1934. In 1928, the Scottish scientist Alexander Fleming returned from vacation and found his laboratory in a complete mess, with culture plates left out and contaminated all over the bench. Instead of throwing everything away, he noticed something strange. On one of the plates, a mold had grown, and around it, the bacteria were all dead. That mold was producing a substance that killed microbes. It was penicillin, the first antibiotic. Alfred Nobel became enormously wealthy by inventing dynamite in 1867 and selling explosives to the entire world. In 1888, when his brother died, a French newspaper made a mistake and published the obituary of Alfred himself while he was still alive, calling him the merchant of death who had gotten rich killing people. Reading how he would be remembered after death truly shook him. He decided to change the fate of his own name. He left nearly his entire fortune to create the Nobel Prizes, which reward those who do good. During the war, Allied soldiers sang a ditty mocking that Hitler had only one testicle. It seemed like just a trench joke to humiliate the enemy. But in 2015, the account of a doctor who had supposedly treated Hitler wounded in World War I came to light, noting that he did in fact have monarchism, an undescended testicle. Hitler is remembered as a radical vegetarian, but the true story is more complicated. He avoided meat mainly because of serious digestive problems that tormented him with gas and painful cramps, and not exactly out of love for animals. Accounts from people close to him and from his cooks say that, despite the reputation, he was not that strict and even ate things like young pigeon. The image of a committed vegetarian was, in large part, pure propaganda. Hitler projected the image of a simple man, devoted only to the nation, but behind it, he amassed an enormous fortune. His book, Mein Kampf, sold millions of copies, partly because it became nearly mandatory. It was given to every couple that married and distributed in schools, and each copy earned royalties for the author. On top of that, he made money from his own image on postage stamps. The only direct relatives Hitler had left ended up living in the United States, descendants of his nephew William Patrick, with the surname quietly changed to Stuart Houston, leading a quiet life on Long Island. Then, a powerful story emerged about them. The brothers had supposedly made a silent pact to never have children so that Hitler's bloodline would end with their generation. None of them had descendants. Hitler came very close to dominating all of Europe, but sank himself with wrong decisions. In 1940, he ordered the tanks to stop near Dunkirk, letting hundreds of thousands of Allied soldiers escape to England. In 1941, he opened a second front by invading the vast Soviet Union and bogged the army down in the Russian winter. And he declared war on the United States without needing to. Each of those steps, out of pure stubbornness, helped turn the war against him. On August 27, 1896, the Sultan of Zanzibar died, and a relative took the throne without the approval of the British, who effectively controlled the region. The empire issued a blunt ultimatum. He was to vacate the palace. The new sultan locked himself inside with his armed men. At the scheduled time of the ultimatum, British warships simply opened fire. In approximately 38 minutes, the palace was in ruins and it was all over. It was the shortest war ever recorded in history. Stubby was a stray mutt who wandered into the middle of an American military training and ended up in the trenches of France in World War I. There, he saved lives for real. He warned of gas attacks long before the humans could smell anything, located wounded men lost in the field, and on one occasion held a German spy by the clothing until the soldiers arrived. He became an honorary sergeant, met presidents, and returned home as a hero. In August of 1914, at the Battle of Mons, British soldiers faced a much larger German force and, against all odds, managed to retreat in good order. Shortly after, a story spread that angels or phantom archers had appeared in the sky to protect the English troops that day. The story became a sensation, and many people swore on their lives it was true. The detail is that it all originated from a fiction story published by Arthur Machen in a newspaper. Yusuf Karsh was a portrait photographer capable of capturing the soul of the most powerful people in the world in a single photo. In 1941, he photographed Winston Churchill, who insisted on posing with the cigar in his mouth. Without asking permission, Karsh simply snatched the cigar from the Prime Minister's fingers. Churchill was furious for 1 second, and it was precisely that scowling look that became one of the most famous photographs in history. The French woman, Jeanne Calment, is the oldest person with a verified age in history. She died in 1997 at 122 years and 164 days old. She was born before the Eiffel Tower existed and claimed to have sold paints to the painter Van Gogh when she was young. In 2018, however, Russian researchers raised a serious suspicion. The real Jeanne may have died in 1934, and her daughter Yvonne may have assumed her mother's identity to dodge taxes. Official validators deny it, but the controversy remains open. Around 1880, the body of an unknown young woman was pulled from the Seine River in Paris. Nobody ever identified her, but the serene face, with an almost smile, so enchanted people that they made a death mask of it, which became a craze and was copied all over Europe. Decades later, in 1960, a mannequin manufacturer chose precisely that face for the CPR training dummy, the famous Resusci Anne. Robert Wadlow, a gentle and shy American, is the tallest man ever reliably recorded in history. He reached 8 feet 11 inches and was still growing. A problem with his pituitary gland caused his body to produce growth hormone non-stop. He became an attraction and traveled the country, but he needed metal braces on his legs to support himself because he could barely feel his feet. In 1940, one of those braces cut his leg. The infection spread, and he died at just 22 years old. On August 6, 1945, the atomic bomb at Hiroshima killed approximately 140,000 people, some instantly and some in the months that followed. Among the survivors were children who watched their own city melt around them. Years later, some were asked to draw what they still remembered, and the papers contained things difficult to face: people with skin peeling off, human shadows burned into the ground, rivers full of bodies. They were small hands, recording a horror too great for words. The Therac-25 was a state-of-the-art radiation therapy machine from the 1980s, computer-controlled, used to treat cancer patients. But it hid a fatal software flaw. When the operator typed the commands too quickly, the machine could deliver a radiation dose 100 times higher than the correct one, without showing any error on the screen. Between 1985 and 1987, at least 6 patients received brutal doses. Several were burned to death from the inside. On July 19, 1957, in the Nevada desert, 5 United States Air Force officers and a cameraman stood at a spot marked on the ground as Ground Zero, without any protective clothing. Directly above them, a fighter jet fired a rocket with a 2-kiloton nuclear warhead, which detonated at approximately 20,000 feet of altitude. The idea was to prove to the public that nuclear weapons in the air posed no danger to civilians below. They laughed at the time. Several would die of cancer in the years that followed. Neutral and placid Switzerland, which has not entered a war since the days of Napoleon, is the most prepared country in the world for a nuclear attack. A 1963 law requires that every resident have a guaranteed spot in a nuclear fallout shelter. The result is a network of more than 360,000 bunkers, spread through building basements, tunnels, and mountains, with capacity to shelter more people than the entire population of the country. The AK-47 was created by the Soviet Mikhail Kalashnikov in the late 1940s. Simple, cheap, and nearly indestructible, it worked in mud, sand, and ice without jamming. That is why it spread across the planet like no other weapon in history. It is estimated that approximately 100 million units exist, more than any other rifle ever manufactured. It became a symbol of guerrilla movements and revolutions, and even appears on the flags of countries. Kalashnikov, in old age, said he regretted what his weapon had caused. World War I combined modern weapons with old military tactics, and the result was an unmatched slaughter. Soldiers spent months inside muddy trenches, surrounded by rats, disease, and bodies. Advancing meant running straight into machine guns that mowed down entire rows in a few seconds. Poison gas burned the lungs from the inside of anyone who breathed it. There were approximately 20 million dead, and many of those who returned were never the same again. In the absolute chaos of the battlefields, some German soldiers used a risky trick to try to survive. They lay motionless on the ground among the real corpses, pretending to be already dead. Some did this just to escape when a position was lost. Others used the tactic for ambush. They let the enemy approach confidently and then grabbed their weapon and fired at point-blank range. The problem was that once the trick was discovered, anybody on the ground became a target, alive or not. In 1971, the psychologist Philip Zimbardo set up a fake prison in the basement of Stanford University. He randomly assigned ordinary volunteers to the roles of guards and prisoners just to see what would happen to normal people. Within days, the guards began to humiliate and abuse the prisoners with evident pleasure, and the study had to be shut down in a hurry. For years, it was cited as proof that power corrupts anyone. Today, it is known that Zimbardo coached the guards, and the study has lost credibility. In 1867, the United States bought from Russia a vast and frozen territory for $7.2 million, roughly 2 cents per acre of land. At the time, newspapers ridiculed the deal and nicknamed it Seward's Folly, after the secretary who closed the agreement, thinking he had thrown money away on a useless glacier. Decades later, they discovered gold and oil there. That glacier was bought for a price that today would not even cover half of a top soccer player.